Here's a strange fact. Pokemon's highest rated game in history doesn't have a single battle in it, and that should terrify every fan of their mainline games. Pokemon built its entire identity on turn-based combat, and yet we find ourselves in an uncomfortable reality where their most beloved game was designed explicitly to avoid battles entirely. But what's even more bizarre is that Pokemon Pokopia is yet another example of one of their spin-off titles getting more praise than their mainline games. Games like Legends Arceus, Pocket TCG, and Pokemon Go all seem to have made a bigger splash in the broader gaming market than the heavily criticized Scarlet and Violet or Sword and Shield. And this isn't just a coincidence either. There's a pattern here, and once you see it, the future of the franchise looks a lot less certain than the Pokemon company wants you to believe. Why? Because Pokemon Pokopia is changing the game. It is currently the highest rated Pokemon game ever on Metacritic. The upcoming life sim has been almost universally praised by critics, and as you can see, Pokemon Pokopia has earned an 88 over on Metacritic leading up to its launch. Now I'm curious to see what the user score will actually be, but if we compare this to Legends EA, the most recent Pokemon game to launch, we see that came in at a 78 with a ton of users voicing their criticism for this game, and that's a 10-point difference or a 12% bump in critic score. And things only get worse when you compare it to Pokemon Scarlet, which is the latest mainline Pokemon game, coming in at a 72 and a brutal 3.5 user score, which by the way I feel like is completely deserved. I played through these games, I beat these games, and it was a struggle. So the reviews speak for themselves. Pokemon Pokopia is the highest rated Pokemon game in modern history, and it's not even close. Even if we go back to Pokemon Sword and Shield, we see this comes in at an 80, so it's still 10% above that, and the user score is abysmal here. In fact, we have to go all the way back to Pokemon Y version to see a mainline Pokemon game land the same meta score of an 88 with a generally favorable user score. So this is where the critics and the users are a bit more in line here. But Pokemon Y came out in 2013. This game is over 12 years old. So again, I have to reiterate, Pokemon Pokopia is by far the best reviewed Pokemon game in over a decade. But here's the awkward part. Pokemon Pokopia wasn't even primarily developed by Game Freak, which is literally the father of Pokemon. All of the mainline Pokemon games have come from the Game Freak studio, and obviously it is co-developed by Game Freak. But now that we saw the most recent Pokemon Presents launching last Friday, we know that Game Freak has been busy at work building Pokemon Winds and Waves. And as a matter of fact, we can even see right here, it is on record that Game Freak lacked experience in the sandbox game genre, so Koei Tecmo's Omega Force was chosen to co-develop the title alongside them on recommendation from the Pokemon company, as Omega Force had previously worked on similar titles such as Dragon Quest Builders 2. And if you guys have seen any gameplay from Dragon Quest Builders 2, you'll know that Pokemon Pokopia is like shockingly similar in a lot of different ways. And so when we look at the fact that Game Freak doesn't really have experience in this genre, and the final product of Pokemon Pokopia looks awfully similar to Dragon Quest Builders 2, I think it's abundantly clear to anybody paying attention that this game is primarily made by Koei Tecmo. I mean, it doesn't take Ace Attorney to put two and two together, right? I mean, I think like it's pretty obvious what actually happened here. And so let's think about the mainline Pokemon games for a second. These are the ones that Game Freak spends the most time on. When you really think about what Pokemon games have really moved the needle over the last 10 years, it's definitely not the mainline games. I mean, even if we look at the Switch itself, Pokemon Legends Arceus is often given credit for being the best Pokemon game on Switch. And when we think about the most impactful Pokemon game to launch in the last decade, if not two, the answer is Pokemon Go. I mean, you know it, I know it, everyone knows it. Pokemon Go was and still is extremely popular. And even recently in the last year, Pokemon Pocket TCG capitalized on the hype of the card game, and they were so successful with that I have even normie friends who don't even play the mainline games downloading this thing on their phone to collect cards. And what we saw last week with Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen, I mean, those games stirred up more interest on the Switch than Pokemon Legends Z ZA did, and it's safe to say that a lot of the people that worked on FireRed and LeafGreen 22 years ago probably don't really work at Game Freak anymore, or at least their title has definitely changed. I swear I don't plan this, she just joins me when I'm filming. Look who came to say hi. She said you guys need to leave a like if you've made it this far. These are Tiger's rules, not mine, and it's almost dinner time, so she's getting excited. She just joins me when I'm filming. But anyway, so what is going on here? We've got, okay, yes, Legends Arceus, that was a fan favorite game on the Switch, but when we look at the mainline games lately, they are just not living up to the expectation of all of these other spin-offs, many of which aren't made by Game Freak themselves. I mean, let's just take a look at some of the Google Trends data here, okay? Because I think this paints a really interesting picture. Over the last year, this is worldwide search data over on Google, and just to be clear, the reason we're looking at this is because I think everybody can agree that there is a very strong correlation between the popularity of a game or a product or a service and how much people are actually searching for it or information about it, right? I mean, that's common sense. If a game is not popular at all, nobody's going to be looking up guides or videos or content or anything, and if a game is super popular, then a lot more people are going to be looking up content for it. Okay, I'm glad we're on the same page there. So let's take a look at some of the games that I just mentioned here. Okay, over the last year, you'll see that the most popular games to come out were Pokemon Legends ZA and Pokemon FireRed and LeafGreen. That's a really awkward situation for Pokemon to be in, and like, look, this is still going to translate to millions and millions of dollars on their bottom line. I mean, they're selling 22-year-old ROMs for 20 bucks a piece. A lot of people bought both, and I'm not really even judging you if you did, right? If you're getting more than $20 worth of personal value out of those games, then enjoy them. Literally yesterday, I completed the Pokedex on FireRed that I actually booted up back when they announced these games, so I didn't end up buying it on my Switch, but like, the appeal is obvious, right? These games are some of the best games in the franchise, and I mean, the data speaks for itself, right? But when your 22-year-old work is performing as well as your latest stuff, that's a little bit awkward. But what's even more interesting is if we look right now, the latest data suggests that Pokemon TCG Pocket and Pokemon Legends EA are hovering around a similar search level, and Pokemon Go is significantly higher than that. Okay, it's at least 4 times more popular than Legends EA when it comes to people searching for content surrounding it. And if you really want to put things into perspective of just how popular Pokemon Go is, you can zoom out to 5 years ago and you'll see that back in the summer of 2021, Pokemon Go was about as popular as Legends EA was at launch. Pokemon Go had already been out for 5 years at that point, and it was just as popular as the biggest Pokemon game that launched simultaneously on Switch and Switch 2. So if a lot of the most culturally impactful Pokemon games lately haven't been the mainline games, then what's going on with Game Freak? Have they lost the sauce? Why do we even let them make the mainline games to begin with, right? I mean, at this point, we might as well give it to somebody else. I mean, okay, look, let me just take a step back here because I do want to make one thing very clear, okay? An 88 review score for a cozy game like Pokemon Pokopia is not the same achievement as an 88 review score on a mainline RPG game, okay? Because the cozy genre operates with a dramatically lower bar for criticism. I mean, it just is what it is. The scope of the game is smaller, the technical expectations are much lower, and the audience is about as casual as it gets, skewing much more towards just enjoyment over critical evaluation of the product. So Pokopia clearing that bar easily isn't surprising, but Game Freak having 10 times the budget and 30 years of experience being unable to clear their own bar for their mainline games is much more concerning and damning. And not only that, but there are some valid criticisms of Pokemon Pokopia as well. As we see over here on The Gamer, this review is one that I found especially impactful. And by the way, I don't want to insult your intelligence. If you guys just want to read this article, I'm going to link it down below. I always link my sources in the description, but if you're curious about my opinion and commentary here, as well as the future of the mainline games, because I'm going to call it right now in this video, then stay tuned. But the article says Pokemon Pokopia is Pokemon meets what exactly? It's kind of Animal Crossing, kind of Dragon Quest Builders, kind of Minecraft, and kind of Viva Pinata, but it's not really any of them. It's not the best bits of them combined, but it's also not a disastrous blob of their worst elements either. It's not original, but it's not copying anything. It's just sort of there. That's my basic feeling towards Pokemon Pokopia. It exists. Parts of it are fun, parts of it are frustrating, sometimes too much happens at once, sometimes it feels a little slow. It's cute, but it's shallow. It's creative, but it's fiddly, it's fine, it's a modern Pokemon game through and through, and that part right there is, oh man, you can feel it, you can feel the tone through the text right there. It's fine, a modern Pokemon game through and through. That is kind of the best way to describe Pokemon over the last 10 years, is just, it's fine, right? Everyone knows it. I'm a diehard Pokemon fan. I have every game on the shelf here, and like, look, the latest games have just been fine, except for Scarlet and Violet. Those are just bad, but we'll talk about that another time. The article goes on to say, but the most disappointing thing is that Pokemon spin-offs have been the stronger offerings over the last few years, with Pokemon Unite, new Pokemon Snap, and Pokemon Pocket all seeing some success by freeing Pokemon from its restrictive framework. This is exactly what I was just trying to get at, but the author of this article words it much better than I have, okay? And they even bring up other games like Unite and new Pokemon Snap, which a lot of people, you know, new Pokemon Snap, I feel like flew under the radar, but for people that loved it, really loved it, especially because it looked beautiful for a Pokemon game. And Pokemon Unite does have a core audience, even though I personally don't know anyone who still plays it. But regardless, the article goes on to say, unfortunately, Pokemon Pokopia is afraid of this freedom. Pokemon Pokopia's Pokemon lack personality. This starts in the game's initial framing. You play as a Pokemon trying to terraform the abandoned lands before you encourage more Pokemon to return. It's an interesting way to center the Pokemon themselves rather than the trainers, but the Mon you play as is a Ditto who spends the vast majority of the game looking and acting like a human, and the overall quest involves discovering why the humans have left this place behind. It's a colossal failure to commit to the bit. Exactly, if you're going to make a game built around Pokemon and you're going to play as a Pokemon, well, why are you just turning into a trainer? And why is the whole game story about the humans and not the Pokemon? Like, I don't know, we played as Pokemon in mystery dungeon games, right? And they could talk to each other. It wasn't weird then, so why do we have to like make the Ditto a human to make it not weird? Like, why can't we just play as, I don't know, I mean, I guess it would be boring if we just played as Pikachu, right? Like, oh, of course you play as the mascot, but I mean, look, would anybody really complain about that? I guess, okay, I guess that the reason you're Ditto is because now you can transform into other Pokemon and use all their moves. I get it, okay, I get it, but the author does have a bit of a point here. They go on to say it continues through the game's personality too. Your professor for the game is Tangrowth, and I appreciate that it's not one of the most popular and marketable Pokemon here, but one the game could have a bit more fun with. The fact Bulbasaur, Squirtle, and Charmander were the first three I discovered gave me a little pause that it would be falling back on old favorites, but after those three, Pokopia throws a whole array at you, and that's to be applauded. My problem is it doesn't really matter who the Pokemon you find are, or at least none of them will change the currently held opinions you have about any given Pokemon. Seeing them in the real world is supposed to be a chance to engage with their personalities, but they all just toddle around happily doing generic things like waving at each other or falling asleep. There's no sense that these Pokemon actually live there, and you quickly notice that their empty sound bites are shared across dozens of Pokemon. It comes back to this fear, and it's something mainline games have too. There's a lack of confrontation, a falseness to everything. Animal Crossing is a relatively chill time, but it works so well because it's spiky. Villagers are mean and rude, which in turn gives you license to hit someone over the head with nets. There's no push and pull in Pokopia. It just exists. And this is what I was talking about before when I said that Pokemon Pokopia is the highest rated Pokemon game and it features no battles. Not only are there no battles, there's not even any conflict. There's nothing to even wrestle with. It's just a cute little game where you bob around and you build things, and there's definitely an audience for that, but it's still shocking to me that this is going to outperform pretty much every recent Pokemon game. The article goes on to say Pokopia's building mechanics have depth but don't feel worth it. All this to say, I don't think Pokemon Pokopia particularly nails the Pokemon side of things, but what about the Pokopia side, which I'm taking to mean the general mechanics? Those don't suffer from the same problems in that it's hard to accuse them of being bland. These are deep systems with a lot of chance for customization, and committed players prepared to sink hundreds of hours in will find a sandbox that allows them near total freedom to construct what they want. However, that's not without its issues. A lot of Pokopia's gameplay feels fiddly, and while you expect a degree of that in the genre, it can become a roadblock. I don't particularly mind that I'm expected to grind for new resources in each area. That's how these games work, and it's in this depth that the sandbox for freedom comes to exist. Each new area also feels unique, yet tied to Pokemon's general world building, so you do get that sense of exploration exploration, but there's so much back and forth. A great deal of your time will be spent traveling from location to location, wondering which storage box you left a particular resource in. Sounds a lot like Minecraft, or at least my Minecraft experience, because I'm not very good at that game. There is no centralized inventory from which to pull all of your owned items from the ether, but instead you must repeatedly construct small wooden boxes to keep a handful of items in, then manually search each box when you need to build something. Again, this is Minecraft. You also can't travel back to areas until you've built a house, which requires a lot of this ferrying back and forth to begin with. And while each land gets a different aesthetic, the goal in each one is the same. Put some grass in a square, or in a square beneath a tree, or in a square behind a rock, and Pokemon appear. Do mostly basic quests around constructing a unique habitat, rinse and repeat. Worse is how much construction slows you down. At one point, I had to gather Pokemon to build a Poke Center, and the game just asks you to fetch the nearest ones to the task. But simultaneously, I had to put up lights around town to progress another quest. I put up lights and lights and lights and wonder what's wrong. Turns out I need to speak to a specific Pokemon hitherto unmentioned by the quest, so they alone can tell me it's really bright now. That Pokemon was building the Poke Center, so I couldn't speak to it until tomorrow. And that, I mean, frankly, that's just bad game design in my opinion. Like, what how is that possible? The blocky nature of the world allows for you to terraform as you wish, but it can make the game tedious, especially in the early stages when you can only water the world in a cross shape that must move each time and seems beholden to the camera angle rather than giving you control. I have no doubt that people who love this game will construct elaborate masterpieces, but for people who think the game is only okay, even just putting up a fence will draw an eye roll. You also can't really control where you place things, even with the mouse control, and will find yourself settling for good enough. That's fitting for Pokemon Pokopia, and frankly, that's kind of fitting for the entire franchise as of the last 10 years, right? I mean, good enough. That's kind of what they've just been throwing out there. There's a fun time to be had here, but ultimately Pokemon Pokopia doesn't explore the Pokemon side of its world and offers building quests that are mostly rigid and repetitive. As ever with Pokemon, there is enough charm to see it through, and the mechanics aren't shallow, even if they're used in aid of the same few tasks over and over again. It's Pokemon's take on a bunch of other villager games it's not quite as good at, but if you persevere, there is a game waiting for you here. You just have to get the actual game over with first. And that's kind of a rough way to end that review here. So the pros and cons: deep building mechanics, good array of locations, and it has Pokemon. The cons are it's too bland and safe to make you feel much of anything. Main quest is repetitive and often unnecessarily roadblocked, and it thinks having Pokemon is enough. And historically, unfortunately, having Pokemon is enough, because this game is going to sell super well. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. I would imagine at minimum it sells as well as Pokemon Legends EA, which frankly isn't a super high bar, but I mean, really, this is even more casual friendly than Pokemon Legends EA. So I mean, what are we talking about here? This thing's going to sell super well. So what does that mean for the future of the mainline games, right? Like, this game is the best reviewed Pokemon game in over a decade, and it doesn't have any battling nor really any conflict at all. And like, frankly, it's hard to even imagine Pokemon games getting more casual than Scarlet and Violet or Sword and Shield, because those games were like the smoothest brain, like drooling mouth breather Pokemon games that we've ever seen, right? Like, it's hard to not beat those games as long as you actually play them. Like, it's those were dumb easy games, okay? But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Game Freak finds a way to make the mainline games even more casual, right? Because in Scarlet and Violet, we already had auto battling as you explore. A lot of you might have forgotten this, but you can send your Pokemon out and they can auto battle as you run through a field, right? You'll see it pop up on the screen. They basically just one-shot things and they are auto battling, right? But at least in that regard, you had to like traverse through a field in order for the auto battle to occur, at least from what I remember. So what's next? What could be more casual than auto battling? Well, the answer is like, I don't know, idle auto battling, kind of like a cookie clicker type of experience where you just stand there and you slowly farm experience. Or maybe they'll take a page out of like World of Warcraft's book where you accumulate rested experience as you're logged off, so that way when you come back on, you have like an hour's worth of like super fast leveling to catch you up to speed. And I just, they'll figure out a way, trust me, right? And this is especially true in 2026 and going into 2027, because now competitive battling for Pokemon is being migrated over to Pokemon Champions. Okay, so the hardcore battling component of Pokemon is now going to be its own dedicated game. So there's no need for the mainline games to cater to that scene anymore. So they can make these games games as easy as they want to, and there's not going to be any pushback because the competitive battlers are going to be playing something else. So it's too soon to tell, but let's just be honest here. If Pokopia sells well, you can bet on the mainline games getting even more casual friendly. Why would they not? Tremendous sales success for Pokemon Pokopia is the only thing that will be stopping the mainline games from getting more casual friendly, because it's already getting tremendously good reviews, and if people actually buy Pokopia and enjoy it, it's going to be a mask off moment for the Pokemon fandom, because what that will mean is diehard Pokemon fans didn't actually really like battling to begin with. I mean, that's the only logical conclusion to draw from all this, right? I mean, if this game reviews really well and it goes on to sell really well, well then you didn't like conflict or battling in Pokemon to begin with. All you cared about was, oh look, a cute little Pokemon. And that's why all of the criticisms of the Pokemon franchise that I have made over the last couple of months, and many people have made over the last couple of years, fall flat and get reacted to with backlash from the Pokemon community, right? Because all the criticisms that I have for games like Legends EA and Scarlet and Violet, and to an extent Sword and Shield, these are all criticisms that come from the perspective of somebody who plays these games because I like turn-based RPGs, right? And I grew up on Pokemon Yellow version taught me how to read, okay? Like I was 4 or 5 years old when I played those games. My brain was barely even developed. I mean, it's still not fully developed, but it was even smaller back then, okay? So I not only love Pokemon, but I also love turn-based RPGs, and that I think is the disconnect between my expectations for these games and what a majority of the core fan base is looking for, right? The core fan base is not looking for a challenge. They're not looking for any sort of graphical fidelity or deep storytelling or any other benchmark of quality that you would use for basically any other game. They're just looking for, oh look, it's an Eevee. I love that Eevee. I've been a fan of Eevee for 30 years. Like, that's what we're going to learn. This is unironically a make or break it moment for Pokemon, okay? If the fans eat this game up like hotcakes, it continues to review well, the user score is good, the sales are through the roof, then we have our answer. Pokemon fans are not fans of video games. They are fans of collecting Pokemon. And I know that sounds like it should be a no-brainer, but like, I don't know, I always thought that like maybe you liked video games and not just looking at Meryl and saying, wow, Meryl's so cute. Oh man, look at Pichu. Pichu's adorable. You guys have been doing that for 30 years. You're not sick of that yet? I mean, this is why people say Pokemon fans are the Disney adults of gaming, right? It's like the bar is so low that we're like tripping over it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. And here's what makes this matter even more. What was Pokemon's most recent release? It was Legends EA. And what was the thing about Legends EA that they focused on the most? It was evolving the combat in the game. We went from traditional turn-based to a more real-time battle style, and people either loved it or they hated it. It seemed like most people liked the changes, and it felt like a breath of fresh air in that game, right? So on one hand, you have them experimenting with Legends EA and leaning more into the battle aspect of Pokemon, and here we have Pokopia, where we're leaning farther away from battles. In fact, we're just removing them entirely. And so the comparison here is going to matter a ton when it comes to the future of Pokemon, because if the game with less focus on battles does better than the game with more focus on battles, I think the trajectory of the mainline series is pretty clear, at least in my opinion. And I'm not sitting here saying they're going to remove battles from mainline games. Obviously that's not it, right? But what I'm saying is, if Pokemon Pokopia does way better than Legends EA, I think the mainline games are going to have every excuse to lean into that casual audience and just make the games a little bit easier, a little more casual friendly, even more so than they already are. But I'm really interested to see how well Pokemon Pokopia does, because I do expect it to do well. Now, do I expect it to sell Switch 2 units? I actually kind of do, right? And the reason I think that it will is because my girlfriend straight up just said like, hey, maybe I'll just buy a Switch 2 for this game. And I'm just like, hey, that's a lot of money for one game, okay? But at the same time, I think there are thousands and thousands of people that are also in her shoes, right? Everyone has that one game that pushes them over the edge. For some people, it's Mario Kart. For some people, it's Donkey Kong Bonanza. For other people, they're gonna hold out until the next mainline Pokemon games, or maybe they're gonna hold out till the next 3D Mario or the next Legend of Zelda. So really, you know, there's all these people that are just kind of waiting for that one game to come around. And I think that a lot of people, you know, might have been waiting for an Animal Crossing game to pull the trigger on the Switch 2, and this game is like kind of close enough, and it's sparking enough curiosity amongst the cozy gamer fans that maybe they will just go out and buy a Switch 2 for this game. And like, there's nothing wrong with that. And honestly, if she gets the game, game, then I'm probably going to be playing it with her, because there is the free game sharing experience with this, right, where only one copy of the game needs to be owned in order to have multiplayer across multiple Switch consoles, and you can share the game from Switch 2 down to Switch 1. So I might actually get first-hand experience with Pokemon Pokopia, which is something that I didn't get with Pokemon Legends EA because I couldn't bear to give them my money. It just wasn't worth it. So we'll have to wait and see. But guys, if you made it all the way to the end of this video, consider dropping a thumbs up on it. It really helps out the channel a ton. And you might think you're subscribed because you've seen a ton of my videos, but you're actually not. Double check down below.